And welcome in to Move the Chains. I'm your host, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Directing the show is my boy Ernest. We got Josiah producing, and Derek is engineering. That's the team behind the scenes that gets it done. All right, on my call sheet this week, the New York Giants made a giant decision on their head coach. And I think it was the proper decision, but I'm going to talk to you about the premise of it being the wrong decision in the first place. And I'm going to Bam's Brick Picks in my Chain Gang chat. I'm going to give you the 4 best games I deem in the NFL this weekend. I'm going to tell you who's going to win those games and why. There's been a lot of losing lately at Lambeau Field. So a lot of people are hitting the panic button on the Green Bay Packers. I'm just not one of those guys, and I don't think you should. And I'm going to tell you why panicking about the Packers is a nonsense narrative. And last but not least, the College Football Playoff Committee is getting it right and wrong. And I'll tell you why. You don't want to miss it. All that and more right here on Move the Chains, but you know how we do it. Let's kick it off with the opening toss. So let's put it into perspective what the Giants did right here. Brian Dabol, and I've got a graphic that I want to show you here in terms of the Giants' record under Dabol year to year. Again, success in his first season could be a detriment. I said the same thing about Gus Malzahn at Auburn when he led them to a national championship game appearance. That was the expectation. That what people thought should be the standard at Auburn. It didn't turn out to be, and it shouldn't have been because it was more of an outlier. Now, more in this case than it was for Gus Malzahn, but you see the regression on the Brian Dabol. I don't want to necessarily harp on Brian Dabol and his regression because the Giants firing him is the bigger issue here. And it's not even Brian Dabol. I think the Giants made the right decision in firing him, but it's because they made the wrong decision in hiring him. And here's where I'm going. If you're an NFL franchise now, this is what you think about, and this is what you think like. I need an offensive-minded head coach because it's all about the quarterback. And if I go and get a guy who is the offensive coordinator for Josh Allen when the Bills team was playing well, regardless of what Sean McDermott was doing, right, it's as if we're not even paying attention to what the head coach is doing and what the front office has been doing with the Bills and drafting and developing. That doesn't matter, but we've got an offensive coordinator that's been able to put Josh Allen in position to be successful, so he should be our next head coach. See, that's the formula and the philosophy for a lot of teams in 2025. So when you get Brian Dabol, you ask yourself, well, regardless of the quarterback that we bring in, a la Daniel Jones, he should be able to make them better. And the truth of the matter is, I consistently say this, and I want to reiterate this, most teams fail players in the NFL because they have a flawed philosophy. And it's not just the Giants. And this is where I want to commend the Giants and celebrate them for the same reasons that I'm berating them right now. Because hiring Brian Dabol was under the wrong premise. And it was the wrong answer because he obviously wasn't a culture guy. But firing him was the right thing to do, even in the midst of drafting Jackson Dart. Because the only thing that I've heard the past 3 months when Jackson Dart got drafted was, if you play him and he succeeds, it should extend Brian Dabol's job. And I would just say, why? In what world does simply having a quarterback of the future and making him and putting him in a position to be successful make you a great head coach? It can make you a great offensive coordinator. So if Brian Dabol were somehow the offensive coordinator for the Giants, I could see it working. But again, I'm proud of the Giants because they didn't say that Brian Dabol and Jackson Dart had to be on the same page. And I'm going to take you to what the Giants haven't been able to do this year. And I was having this conversation with actually one of my directors in the back regarding the Atlanta Falcons earlier and their lack of production, so to speak. And I said, well, you have to give them time. And I said, that's what happens in the NFL when you keep rotating coaches. I don't think that's the issue here because I think Brian Dabol has had enough time to show you that he's not the guy in terms of leading your program. And if he's not the guy in terms of leading your program, what is he going to do for you? Yes, Jackson Dart is good, but you could say Jackson Dart was as good because of what he's done in college, the same way that Caleb Williams struggled coming into the NFL because he wasn't getting that type of training and tutelage in college. So there are so many different variables and so many different factors that go into the development of a team, the development of a quarterback, and even the development of a head coach. But you saw regression. Now, I don't know about Joe Shane, the general manager. I don't know how long he's going to be in that position. And frankly, I don't care. All I want to see from the Giants is what you do next. And see, here's the bigger issue. Who do you go after? And it's not about the person you go after. It's about the personality that you go after. If you're the New York Giants, you need an alpha male. You need a true players coach, not a players coach that gives players what they want, a players coach that gives players what they need, a players coach that will call you out on the practice field or during a game because you're not executing the right way. You need a coach who calls you out because you're not facilitating the type of culture or creating that peer-to-peer accountability. That's what they need. They need a Mike Tomlin type coach. They need a Dan Campbell type coach. They need a Mike McDonald type coach. And to me, that's more of a referendum than anything. And I'm going to get to this in my next segment when I talk about Seattle, because Seattle has brought in a coach in his second year that has completely flipped. The New England Patriots have brought in a coach in his first year that has completely flipped what those organizations are. That's what you need. So the Giants did a great job in firing Brian Dabol, not because he needed to be fired, but because the philosophy needed to be fired. The only question I have about the Giants moving forward is, are you going to move forward with the same philosophy, or are you going to change your ways? Because that in itself will dictate the success of this program and the success of your franchise quarterback in the future, Jackson Dart. All right, when we come back from the break, I'll pick games in the NFL with my brick picks. And you don't want to miss these games, and you don't want to miss my picks. Back and we'll move the chains right after this. And welcome back into Move the Chains. I appreciate everybody taking the time to watch. And before we get to my brick picks during the Chain Gang Chatter, I want to take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for being able to host Move the Chains. Secondly, I always want to thank you, the fans, for wherever you're watching this program. There is a lot of opportunities for you to be doing things and you're watching the program. So shout out to everybody who supports this on whatever social media platform or on the Sports Leader WXTX. Fox 54. To the best production crew in the business. I told you who they were earlier. It never changes. They get the job done on a consistent basis. And you've seen the QR code at the bottom of the screen. If you want to make sure that you put yourself in position to better your life financially, physically, mentally, and spiritually, click on that QR code, look at the protection plan, and take action. Having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for the Chain Gang Chatter. Man, so top-notch games in the NFL this weekend, and I don't think we need to delay it because I want to get into each of these games in depth. We're going to start with the 1 o'clock Eastern game against Tampa Bay and against the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills are currently in the second spot in the AFC East, and Tampa Bay is leading the NFC South. But I look at this game, and it's funny how certain teams are viewed a certain way, and then a couple of weeks later, they're not. I told you that I thought Tampa Bay was the best team in the NFL about 3 weeks ago. And I still believe that when they're fully healthy, and that's what they're not. And the schedule also matters in this situation because I look at Tampa. They had to play the Detroit Lions in Detroit after the Lions lost on the road to the Chiefs. Now they've got to go to Buffalo to play the Bills in Buffalo after Buffalo lost on the road to Miami. You can't make this stuff up. That stuff matters. And if you add that to the health or lack thereof for Tampa Bay, I think it can pose a problem. If you're Buffalo, I'm not going to sit here and say there are no warning signs for the Buffalo Bills. I didn't think coming into the season I could call the Buffalo Bills inconsistent or playing down to competition. I just didn't believe it. I remember the Patriots game, and I think the Patriots are better than what some people expected. But the Patriots, I think, are not as good as some people think. And yes, they beat Buffalo in Buffalo's possibly worst game of the season. And then you see them against the Falcons. But then you see them against the Chiefs, which didn't surprise me because they're the Chiefs. But then you see them against the Dolphins. So the Jekyll and Hyde nature of the Buffalo Bills really has me concerned in that manner. But what I'm not concerned about is the run game of the Buffalo Bills. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers gave up 2 50-yard runs to the Patriots last weekend, something that's generally not happening against the Todd Bowles coach defense, but it did happen. Now you're going on the road to take on a team who just got embarrassed by Miami, who has one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. And by the way, they still have Josh Allen and are getting healthier defensively. I like Buffalo in this game to beat Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is still a contender to come out of the NFC when healthy. But I think Buffalo is the team that understands the sense of urgency. And because this is a game against another good team, they won't necessarily be caught off guard. Buffalo wins this game at home, beating Tampa Bay. All right, the next game that I want to discuss here, huge game in the NFC West. And can I say this for a reason? Let me go big picture on these teams. You see the Rams are a 3.5-point favorite. This is going to be one of the best games of the year in my estimation. I'm not going to leave this game thinking anything negative about either of these two teams. I may say that they can be better, but I won't be negative about either of these two teams. But can I tell you why? The Seattle Seahawks are the reason you should never tank in the NFL. If you look at their records over the past 6 to 7 seasons, 9-8, 9-8 the past few seasons, made the playoffs at 9-8, I think in 2022, the last year they made the playoffs. They had a 17 year in Pete Carroll's, one of his last years in Seattle, but they were always competitive. They never said, let's be bad so that we can get better. They knew we could get better by simply being competitive. And then what they did, they not only killed it in the draft with guys like Charbonnet and Weatherspoon and Jackson Smith and Jigma, of course. This is a team that throughout the entire season thus far has had their entire offensive line in the same spots starting every single game. This is why this team hasn't lost on the road. The Rams haven't lost but one game at home. So the rubber's going to meet the road here. But for the first time, Seattle's going to be without Jalen Sundell, their starting center. I think that matters. Even though Seattle did a great job in the new age of quarterback drafting, we're drafting a quarterback that's already in the NFL as opposed to college. I think they've done a great job with that. But I look at the Rams, and I look at big picture LA as well, who a couple of years ago didn't have a number 1 or number 2 rounds, first or second round draft pick, and went 5-12. And have then been great since winning the Super Bowl after that year as well. These are two teams that bleed consistency. I just think in this game, because there's going to be a first-time shakeup in the offensive line for Seattle, the Rams will be able to take advantage of it. And I think when it comes to pressure, Sam Darnold won't be able to necessarily handle it in this game, as well as Matthew Stafford, who's playing at an elite level. The Rams at home are able to win this football game, and it doesn't mean that either of these two teams aren't still contenders in the NFC, because they both are. I just think the Rams win this game against Seattle at home, and I think the difference will be up front. The next game, Chiefs-Broncos. This is all I have to say. The Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites on the road against an 8-2 team that leads the AFC West. That should tell you all you need to know. I think Kansas City, I'm telling you now, I think they win this football game. And, the Broncos have been it's weird in the NFL this year. Do you know the Patriots are, 9-2 now? Or 8-2 or what have you? And they are minus in the turnover differential or even. The Broncos are 8-2, and they're -4 in the turnover differential. And they don't have Pat Surtain. And the one thing that the Chiefs do well is they play well against zone with Patrick Mahomes in that offense, and they play well against man because his ability to identify matchups and also get out of the pocket when he needs to. Riley Moss, I think, will have a problem in this matchup against the Chiefs. Now, the only problem the Chiefs can have is if this great Denver front can get after the quarterback, because they do lead the league in sacks. I think that will be Denver's saving grace. If the Broncos can get after Patrick Mahomes and force him into bad decisions, which doesn't happen often, the Broncos have a chance. But I think the Chiefs in this moment understand, coming off of a bye, what the situation is. They're as healthy as they're probably going to be. Josh Simmons is back at left tackle, and I think Kansas City goes on the road and beats Denver this weekend. All right, the last game I want to pick here is a huge game in the NFC, and that's the Lions at the Eagles. The Eagles are 2.5-point favorites, and I'll simply tell you this. The Lions are very good, but they have been inconsistent this year. They have not been on the road what they have been at home. Just look at the margin of victory and the margin of defeat when they go on the road, a la going to Green Bay or a la going to Kansas City. Detroit has to have a great run game because they have to have a good play-action game. They're not a drop-back team. Philadelphia can force you to get out of the run and have to be a drop-back team. I just don't think it poses a great situation for the Detroit Lions. You notice how I haven't gone deep on the A.J. Brown situation? Because I'm not going to go that deep on the A.J. Brown situation, because I understand what it is. I understand it's a leader of the team telling you that they have to be better. And you've seen this in the past and what's happened after A.J. Brown has had these kind of situations. I think Philadelphia wins this game at home. I think the bevy of running backs that Philadelphia has will wear down the Detroit Lions and put Philly in a position to continue to take hold of the 1 seed in the NFC. All right, when we come back from the break, people are panicking about the Packers. Don't do it. I'll tell you why, my favorite segment of the show, right after this. And welcome back into the show. And at this point in the show, I always go to my favorite segment, and that's the nonsense narrative. Run it. So the next man up mentality does mean something, because you can't quit. If you're the Packers, are you okay with losing back-to-back games at home? Of course not. I'm not going to sit here and act as if that didn't happen. as if the Panthers didn't go to Lambeau and as if the Eagles didn't just go to Lambeau and beat you. All I'm saying is, if you look at a Fortune 500 company, and there are 4 quarters in the fiscal year, and let's say that they're above their previous year's earnings in 3 of the 4 quarters, but in 1 quarter, they kind of slipped up. Doesn't mean that their bottom line didn't still see a profit at the end of the season. And I think that's what you have to look at with the Green Bay Packers. If you're worried about Tucker Kraft being injured, you should be. He's a phenomenal player, has had a phenomenal year this year. But the Packers have an elite defense. And I think what happened is when they signed Micah Parsons, the expectations for this team went through the stratosphere. Because people look at what Jordan Love in the offense has been able to do at a ceiling-type level, especially against the Cowboys a couple of years ago in the playoffs, and they try to force the progression. And I don't want to seem like a broken record here because the Packers are in a situation to where they can get better, right? The offensive line can play better. This team is, I think, 1-3 when their defense is holding teams under 17 points. That's not great, but the defense is elite, and the offense has a running game that they can depend on and a quarterback that can make plays when they need to. Consistency is the key, and everybody understands that. But don't let one patch of a football season determine why you should panic about a football team. This team has shown that they can beat some of the best teams, and it's shown its inconsistency. That's where you're growing. Remember, this is a young team. Stop celebrating the fact that they're a young team and their window is so wide open and act like there aren't some of the same falters and downfalls of having a young team. There are developmental issues at times, and there are lacks of judgment at times. It happens when you're babies like the Packers, but don't panic. I think Green Bay will be fine. When we come back from the break, I'm going to tell you why the College Football Playoff Committee is on point, and they're also off their rocker. Back with the final segment of the show right after this. Welcome back in. It's time for the final segment of the show. It's time for the final drive. The College Football Playoff Committee thinks that Miami's better than Georgia Tech, and they're getting that right. Miami is a top 15 team and could be higher. But the reason that the problem exists is because you're guaranteeing a spot to a conference champion in the Power Four, and Miami's 7th in their conference. So they likely won't even get to the conference championship game. So committee, you're doing the right thing by saying Miami should be ranked higher just because of where they are in their conference. So make the change when it comes to how you choose these teams. Hey, another banger. Don't forget, you can not only catch Move the Change right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, like, leave a comment, hit that notification bell so you can know when we have videos. Hey, like I said, another banger for the best production crew in the business. I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Make sure you scan that QR code to look at the protection plan. And as always, right here on Move the Chains, God bless.